Hi, stranger. Welcome to the Archives Grotesque, a compendium of all things occult, unknown, and weird. How do the archives smell? A little like sulfur, a lot like flat LaCroix. Today we're talking about Thessaly, also known as Aeolia, a region in Greece. Thessaly's geography is defined by its looming mountains and its fertile plains. Mount Olympus is in Thessaly, yes, that Mount Olympus, and so is Pelion, the mountain home of the legendary centaur Chiron, tutor to Achilles and a powerful mage in his own right. In ancient times, Thessaly served as a barrier between Greece and the supposedly wild peoples further to the north in the Balkans. It was a useful bulwark, but an awkward fit. By Athenian standards, the Thessalians were uncivilized. They waged fierce wars amongst themselves and resisted the cultural developments of Athens and the rest of Greece. Much like the people of the mountains resisted feudalism and religious conversion during the medieval period, the people of Thessaly seemed stuck in the past to the other fast-developing Grecian societies. And much like the medieval imagination located depraved witchcraft in the mountains, the imagination of the Greeks located its most dangerous witches high in the wild mountains of Thessaly, an association that stuck throughout antiquity and beyond. In that ancient imagination, Thessaly was sort of unstuck in time, a bridge reaching back to the Bronze Age into the lost magic arts of prehistoric peoples. For example, like Achilles, Thessalian witches were supposedly conversant with horses, harkening back to an imagined time when all humans could speak the languages of nature fluently. Many ancient authors built on the association between Thessaly and witchcraft. Lucan's Erichtho, a hideous and wonderful necromancer, was a Thessalian, and the storied witch Medea worked her best-known magic, the rejuvenation of Jason's aging father, deep within Thessaly. Erichtho and Medea are both incredibly interesting, but I'll save a deeper dive into their legends for another day. Today, let's focus on Thessaly's moon witches. These famous women worked their magic at the intersection between science and theater, astronomy, and the arcane. In grand displays of their magic prowess, they would gather audiences to watch them draw the moon from the sky during lunar eclipses and enclose the moon in a box, harvesting the moon's precious dew before releasing it back to the night sky. This feat was referenced in many Greek and Roman texts, including one enigmatic reference in a Socratic dialogue. What makes the Thessalian moon witches so interesting is that we don't actually know how exactly they pulled this trick off. During most lunar eclipses, the moon doesn't fully vanish. It just looks reddish, sometimes bluish, and only very rarely does it disappear completely. But references to Thessalian witchcraft are unambiguous. In the eyes of their audiences, the witches made the moon vanish completely. Some scholars suggest that the moon witches might have utilized a kind of highly specialized set design with ropes and pulleys, possibly in addition to hypnotic suggestion to fool their audiences. Hypnotic suggestion to fool their audiences. There are examples of similar practices elsewhere and elsewhen throughout history. And the moon froth produced by the ritual might have been the spittle of the meadow froghopper. I mean, look at that. Looks kinda lunar. Kinda. The best we can do is make informed guesses. The particulars of the ritual are, sadly, lost to time. Speculation. Thessalians didn't have a lot of social capital in ancient Greece, and the women of ancient Greece weren't exactly encouraged to pursue an education in the sciences. If you were a Thessalian woman well-versed in astronomy, and the only currency you had to spend was the fear that your very existence generated, I mean, there are worse rackets, don't you think? And one last note. The very respectable scholar Peter Bicknell, one of my sources for this piece, struggled to date the Thessalian moon witch Aglaonice's period of activity. He wrote, Aglaonice's activity certainly cannot predate the middle of the 3rd century BC. It was only reasonably well on into the Seleucid period, which began in 312 BC, that astronomers of Babylon perfected means of forecasting lunar eclipses infallibly, and of estimating how complete any particular eclipse might be. But remember, the moon magic of Thessalian witches is referenced in a Socratic dialogue, and Plato died decades before the Seleucid period. In other words, Thessalian witches were seemingly predicting lunar eclipses long before the astronomers of Babylon. Listen, this is not a Peter Bicknell call-out. It's difficult to speak with any certainty about events clouded by the accumulated fog of millennia. But what does it say about us that we so readily assume that women living in the remote mountains of Thessaly couldn't possibly have arrived independently at a meaningful scientific discovery? Ancient Greeks wrote off the witches of Thessaly as wild, ignorant, and uncivilized. Is it possible that we, today, might make similar mistakes? Just a thought. Now it's time for the demon of the day. Today's demon is Kunospaston, the bane of all cruise ships. He's a horse in the front, a fish in the back, but you're unlikely to see him out and about. His watery essence dissipates quickly on dry land. Kunospaston loves gold and silver, so he generates terrible whirlpools to sink ships and steal their cargo. He tosses all the human bodies back out though because he has no use for them. Not that I can blame him. Human corpses don't really spark joy for me either. On top of all that, he's the demon of seasickness. So the next time you're retching over the bow of a cruise ship, shake your fist at Kunospaston, and keep an eye out for whirlpools while you're at it. That's all for today, stranger. And don't forget, nothing is real, and neither are you.